On today's show, Laura Heywood interviews
from Hamilton on Broadway, General George Washington himself, Nicholas Christopher. Welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews. I'm Laura Heywood, and it doesn't get any bigger than the first president of the United States, you guys. I have exhumed George Washington, and he's here to talk to us about his views on the Mueller report. Just kidding, duh. But my guest today does know a lot about G-dubs, as we call him. He's playing George Washington on Broadway 8 shows a week. In fact, this is an award-winning role for Nik Christopher. He's the recent recipient of the Outstanding Visiting Musical Performer honor at the Norton Awards, Boston's regional equivalent of the Tonys. I just realized, though, I think that award was for his other role in Hamilton. Nik is a double threat when it comes to roles in this production. Not only is this his third run in the show, he started as Washington's first replacement, taking over for Tony nominee Chris Jackson in 2016. Then, of course, he took a break from the American Revolution to go to Vietnam on stage to play Chris in Miss Saigon. Or was it Korea? What? John. Oh my gosh. I am a mess today. Yes, of course you played John in Miss Saigon.
There's so many Chris's.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Okay. You know what? Let's start from the top. Nik Christopher is here. I'm going to forget my script because clearly I didn't fact check it well enough. This is what happens on live radio. And one of the reasons I actually love doing the show live as opposed to, editing it down is because so many versions of media we see look like people are perfect, and they're edited to be slick and I think that's sort of threatening for somebody who wants to make art.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's part of your charm too, is how real you are. That's what draws people to you and to listen to your voice. You're a true fan of this art form.
Oh, I totally am, even if I get the names of the leads in Miss Saigon wrong.
Exactly. And you like, so many interviews are so tough when people are just reading from bullet points that they don't care about. Like you're invested, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, good. Well, I'm happy to show people that I am a work in progress, and that means getting stuff wrong.
I feel like that's going to be the theme of today.
Getting stuff wrong?
Yeah, and how we're works in progress.
That is kind of my theme of the last 3 or 4 years of my life. I read this book called Mindset by Carol Dweck, which taught me and really got me to understand and internalize for the first time the idea that being new at something is not the same as being bad at it. And this blew my mind because I was good enough at enough things the first time I tried them that I just stuck to those things. And when I was bad at something, I would just never do it, at least not in a way that anybody could see me.
Exactly.
Because I was like, oh, how embarrassing. But what I didn't realize was that all I needed was practice. Yes. And I really believe that on a long enough timeline, we can all become great at anything we want as long as we work at it. And some of us won't have a long enough timeline,
Exactly. And what I'm learning right now, too, is what we'll get into more is you nailed it with practice. So you can actually become really good at something, and you could be good at it. And then once you stop doing it, you can realize that you can become, quote unquote, bad at it, or just out of practice.
Out of practice, yeah. It's really I'm talking about it in terms of doing a radio show, but it really truly is like muscles. You can train and train and train and go from lifting 5-pound weights to bench pressing 300 pounds, and then if you don't do it for a few years, I want to continue this conversation. First, I just want to finish the background information for people who don't know you.
So who the heck is this guy?
Okay, so Nik has a really remarkable resume. I'm going to talk about you like you're not here.
Okay.
He's worked with David Bowie. Like I said, this is his third run in Hamilton. He was in Miss Saigon, and he has an incredible vocal range where if you look on YouTube, you can find Whitney Houston songs and Michael Jackson songs. And he is playing President Washington, the General Washington, on Broadway right now in Hamilton. And he is also a friend of mine who I met when I did an interview with him for another outlet. I guess it was 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Over 2 years ago.
Yeah, and we haven't really seen each other since, but we're connected on social media, and I feel like I I feel like we're really good friends,
yeah, no,
even though I
we've
don't.
seen each other around,
Yeah,
but we haven't had time to sit down and really talk.
Yeah, and here we are, and we're letting everybody listen in.
Yeah.
So for everybody tuning in, this is just a catch up between two friends.
Exactly.
And of course, we're always encouraging people to, when available, buy tickets to see Hamilton.
Absolutely.
Let's face it. This show does not need a lot of extra promotion to sell tickets.
And I can't help you get tickets.
Nor can I. But tickets do become available.
They do.
And there are so many productions going on right now that people can find tickets to their touring productions. And if you buy far enough in advance, you can get them.
Exactly. And I want to really support the touring productions, because a lot of people think that, when I was on tour in Hamilton, people were surprised at the quality of work that we were bringing to the table.
Like it wasn't the real
Exactly.
thing.
So they're like, wow, you guys are pretty good. I can't imagine the Broadway cast, So there's no hierarchy. There's quality control across the board for all the casts.
And so many of them have mixed and matched.
Exactly.
Like you've been on tour and on Broadway.
Exactly.
Michael Owoye was playing Hamilton on tour before he became Hamilton on Broadway.
Exactly.
Or maybe he did Broadway first.
He was a Broadway.
Right. He was Javi's.
Exactly. He was the one show
alternate.
a week Hamilton, as well as Standby Hamilton, and then he ended up going to the West Coast tour of it.
I got to see him do it there.
Yeah.
And it's just like...
He's definitely one of my favorite actors.
Oh, me too. I first met him when he was doing Invisible Thread.
Me too. And I said, who is that guy? And I met him after, and then all of a sudden I didn't even read the playbill because I was so taken by that musical. And so then they announced that the new Standby for Hamilton was coming in, and when I saw him, I fangirled out. I really did. And everybody was like, normally I try to play it cool around the building, and when he came in, I was like, it's you, it's you. So yeah.
He's also like the nicest, most humble person
Exactly.
I've ever met.
Exactly.
I could spend an entire hour right now just talking to you about
Let's
Michael
talk about
Owoye.
Michael Owoye for an hour.
I don't know what he's up to right now.
Yeah. He's on to big things. I just saw him maybe 2 weeks ago, and rightfully so. He's getting the attention he deserves as an artist.
Good. Well, I'm going to call him up and get him on this show.
Yes,
see if we can break some
absolutely.
news.
And by the way, he just got like an iPhone. He had this flip phone that wasn't even like, I think it still had the Snake game on it or something like that, and he just got an iPhone.
My favorite thing about him, or my favorite like little piece of trivia about him, is that he was literally working as a cater waiter when he found out that he was cast as Hamilton on Broadway.
Oh, for real?
And he was right before his shift. And I was like, oh my gosh, when you found out, were you like, bye?
Yeah, I would have been out.
And he was like, of course not. I made a commitment to do
the
the
way
work.
he talks, of course not. I made a commitment.
All right, so we'll do. This is
Enough about him.
a preview episode
All right,
of
this is
Michael
about me.
Owoye.
All right.
Yes, this is about you. So we were talking about being new at things,
Yes.
about the musculature of ideas and skills, any skill, even if it's not physically lifting something, an athletic thing. And I understand that you had an experience recently that sort of shut you down for a little bit.
Yes.
What happened?
So I've been very fortunate, as all the things that you read on my resume.
That I stumbled over.
But I've been doing 8 shows a week for the better part of the past 10 years.
Yeah, it's been a decade. You have taken almost no time off.
Exactly, and the longest time I took off was the past was 6 months. So it was from the end of November through when did I start back in Hamilton? June 18th.
Yeah.
So
did you say 6 months?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that sounds right.
That's about 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Well, but before I started rehearsal for it, and before that I did a reading. So basically, my body started breaking down. And back in 2011, I slipped a disc in my back because when I was playing Collins in Rent at New World Stages with the MJ Rodriguez.
Oh my gosh, I want to hear all this MJ Rodriguez stories. I'm like making notes so that we can circle back around to all these things, because MJ Rodriguez is about to play Audrey in Little Shop of Horrors.
Isn't that amazing?
And I am like so here for it. I've never been to Pasadena Playhouse. I'm like seriously considering a trip out just to see.
Well, we should definitely go, because I definitely.
Let's go together.
Yeah.
All right.
And, well, while I was
Circling
lifting
back
the
around.
MJ Rodriguez, even though she weighs like 65 pounds, I went to go put her down. It was during "Without You," the song, and I put her down, and I felt something interesting in my back, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool, whatever." And the next morning, I woke up, and my legs had seized up, so I couldn't move my legs, and I felt shooting pain down them. So I had to call out of the show, and all that happened, and I ended up getting epidurals in my back in order to keep going.
I'm going to pause you here just for a second because I also have had a slip disc in the same spot, L5S1,
Yes.
if you're a, I don't know, orthopedic.
If you're reading along in your hymnals.
Epidural shots in my spinal cord is probably one of the most awful things that I've ever experienced, like worse than the surgery I eventually had.
Yeah.
I remember the doctor who did the injections, he heard me whimper, and he said, whimper. I'm
Yeah.
not a whimperer,
Yeah.
right? But I was like, "Ah." And he said, don't worry, that's just the needle scraping against your spine.
Why would he say that? I cried out loud when they were numbing the damn thing.
Yeah. It'll be a little pinch.
Yeah. Right. But so yeah, anyway, cut to a year ago in July. So a year ago. I was doing Hamilton, and like the pain had been manageable up until that point. Like I just had to continue stretching, continuing my strength and fitness, continuing acupuncture and getting massages. It was constant maintenance, but it was manageable. Last July, I jumped off the table as playing Burr, during Room Where It Happens. And all of a sudden I felt that same kind of twinge, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. The next day I couldn't move my right leg. And from July through November, I finished out my contract. I couldn't feel my right leg.
It was numb?
Yeah, it was numb, or there would be shooting pain down it.
It's like sciatica?
Yeah,
Yeah, the sciatic nerve is the largest nerve in the body, I think. And basically, it's like somebody has injected fire into your butt cheek.
Exactly.
And then
It's
it
the
goes
biggest pain in my
all the
ass,
way down
literally.
the back of your leg and into your foot. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what
Yeah.
I had. So, I can literally feel your pain.
Yeah. So it was rough, and they got us in these like little high heels in Hamilton that are about 1.5 inches tall, and so your weight is distributed differently, and you're stomping around on the stage and everything. So I was in a whole lot of pain for that amount of time. So I got through my contract, and then after that, it was tough to find a surgeon to perform the surgery. One that I trusted, or one that would even call me back. So after I got an MRI, I found a great surgeon at NYU, and Dr. Spivak. Shout out to Dr. Spivak.
My surgery was done at NYU too.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Do you
It was
know if
not
Dr.
Dr. Spivak. It was Jeffrey somebody.
Jeffrey Sellers.
Not
Also
Jeffrey Sellers, the
does-
producer of
he
Hamilton.
also does surgery.
I'm trying to look it up. Anyway.
So then I had my surgery on April 4th. I was out of commission. I was like, there was nothing I could do. I was laid up in bed. Couldn't go to the gym, which I liked. I had just gotten a dog, and it'd be tough, which we'll talk about later.
I love that
Honeybee. But it was
your
tough to
Instagram
even-
is full of dog pictures.
Yes, her. Even walking around the block was tough for me. I was limping. I was, it was a tough experience. And I'm not like, I felt pain before. Like I've broken fingers and different things in my life, either playing sports or doing shows, and you just kind of muscle through and allow that to happen. But what ended up happening with my back, because I was muscling through and didn't take the time to heal, my slip disc ended up fragmenting off. So the bulging part of the disc broke off, and your spine is in this kind of casing, right? And it broke through that casing and punctured the nerve. Do
you know that this is exactly what happened to me?
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah, and for me, I don't know about for you, that broke. They described it like if you imagine the vertebra as two like short cylinders,
Yes.
and the disc is a pizza between those two cylinders. Like a slice of pizza maneuvered its way out,
Yes.
and was was poking the nerve so much that it was like in danger of severing it.
Yes.
It was like slicing into it.
Yeah,
The doctor described it as the nerve as like a piece of spaghetti. I guess he was really into Italian food.
Yeah, it's making me real hungry.
And if you used a plastic fork to try to cut through a piece of al dente spaghetti,
Yeah.
you'd sort of like mush a dent in it, but
Yeah.
not quite cut it through.
Yeah.
And that was the description that I got. And when I looked at the MRI, that was a cross section of my pelvis.
Yeah.
On the left side, you could see a very visible circle where my sciatic nerve was, and on the right side, it was like a line because it was
Wow.
so smashed.
so smushed.
Yeah. So they cut me open and they
Yeah.
took out that.
Yeah.
He said that and my surgery was in 2010, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
But he said that piece of disc wanted so much to go somewhere that when he sliced into me,
Yeah.
it like flew across the room. It was like boink,
Yeah.
and it was out of there.
Yeah. Well, with me, it ended up, I ended up getting arthritis in that joint. So I don't really know what arthritis is, and I should look it up, but they scraped it out. They scraped out the arthritis. They said they made some more space for the nerve. Y'all didn't know you were getting a science lesson today, did you?
Just off the top of my head, arthritis is the swelling and tenderness of one or more of your joints, and the main symptoms are joint pain and stiffness, which typically worsen with age.
Yeah, so they scraped out something in there. And so anyway, yeah, the recovery period is still ongoing. And thank God I have great people around me to help me with that, with my strengthening. And also playing Washington is a lot easier than running around as Burr.
Yeah. You just point and
just point, people get out of my way, and I fling the sword around
and
my
you
head.
give them intimidating looks.
Yeah, exactly. I did that last night, actually. But anyway, yeah, so it's great. It's good, and I feel what I wasn't ready for was the being out of practice, which is what we were talking about.
Right.
Before.
So how long? So you waited till you were recovered before you began Hamilton. When was the surgery again?
So the surgery was April 4th. And I
Oh,
think I
right.
started
And you were back in the
rehearsals.
show in June?
I was June 18th, but I started rehearsals a month before that, so
Wow.
May 18th. So like a month and a half.
Were you doing a ton of PT?
Yeah. I'm constantly I'm looking for a new PT right now. So if anybody has any recommendations.
I mean,
Hit
I know a
me up.
lot of Broadway performers who
Yeah.
love their PTs. So
Yeah.
if you're serious, I'll get on the horn.
No, that'd be great. So, yeah, and also, there's just a thing. There's a will. There's, when you do what you love, you just have to do it. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I was at. I was very happy for the break. I was very happy for time off. I could start writing. I could start doing other things that I didn't give myself time to do before. But I just needed to get back on stage. I need to get back to be performing. I needed to do it.
Well, there's something very healing about community.
Exactly.
And there is something so devastating about being laid up.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, I actually have not talked in a public forum about my battle with chronic pain.
Yeah.
And I would actually love to tell some of the story to you and to the listening audience. But I was supposed to have a second back surgery.
Wow.
And it was supposed to be, this was probably 18 months ago. It was supposed to be, it was 2 Marches ago, March of 2018. I have had to switch insurance every year for the last 5 years because of, healthcare in this country sucks.
Yeah.
And ever since I haven't had a cushy corporate job,
Yeah.
I've had to, I was on Medicare for a minute and then I wasn't, and then I was back and then I wasn't. So I was having all the same symptoms. And they'd told me that because they didn't do a fusion of my discs, they just pulled out that piece of pizza.
Yeah.
And they were 7/8 of the pizza can still hold up the two
Mercy.
vertebra, but about 10% of people have another piece of pizza wiggle out through that same hole
They said that,
because
yeah.
it was going to be such a process, a much more painful and invasive process to fuse the
Fuse
discs.
things, yeah.
So I was I'll take the chance.
like
but then
blasphemy,
about
so.
10 years later, I I started to have all the same symptoms, and I thought, well, it's obvious that that's happened.
Yeah.
But I kept putting the surgery off because I
Yeah.
really wanted to get insurance that would cover the same surgeon that had done it the first time.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll wait till January. I'll choose an insurance plan that specifically this guy takes so that he can do my surgery. Anyway, the healthcare stuff is kind of an aside, but basically that's when I qualified for Medicaid again, and he didn't take any Medicaid. So I put it off another year,
my God.
and I guess the pain came back around 6 years later. And so I was like, okay, so I'll wait until I'm not on Medicaid anymore next year.
Yeah.
And by the time that came around, he was no longer taking any insurance. So
What do you supposed to pay out of pocket?
he's like a good enough surgeon that people will pay. And there are plenty of, because insurance doesn't pay as much
Yeah.
as people who pay out of pocket.
Yeah.
And that's why plastic surgeons are so rich, is that, most people who get boob
Cosmetic
jobs and
surgery,
stuff,
yeah,
their insurance doesn't cover it. They
Yeah.
pay out of pocket, and it's expensive. So
Yeah.
those doctors get really rich.
Yeah.
And when you're good enough, I guess you can make that decision.
But I'm not trying to judge. I don't know why people, but I'm judging you, doctor. Because don't you get into the healthcare system to help people?
Yeah, well, do no harm and
You know,
whatever. I don't know.
yeah.
I've let it go.
But I guess,
and also, especially because I said his first name and where he was affiliated, I may be getting some of the details wrong, and I am not out to slander anybody.
Yeah.
What I remember is circumstances didn't allow for me to have the surgery with the doctor that I had hoped. I kept putting it off in hopes that it would work out, and it never worked out. I did.
And who knows? He could have been still paying off his student debt. So
Who knows? Yeah, exactly.
Who knows? Maybe he needed to make that extra money.
So what I do remember is that he was so lovely.
Yeah.
And when I had my surgery in 2010, he came back. He came the day after at 6 a.m. in full suit and tie because he was on his way to a conference because he wanted to personally check on me.
Okay.
He had the best bedside manner, just the loveliest man.
Yeah.
So let's let that be.
That's true.
I don't know
We
what
pay for
his
quality, I
insurance
guess.
circumstances
Yeah.
were, but he was not available. So
Yes.
now 2.5 years had gone by since the pain started again. And like you, I was limping. I was, you were talking about numbness. Like a lot of my right foot was numb.
Yeah.
I couldn't sit down without putting a lacrosse ball,
Lord.
right in the sort of in the dent in the butt cheek,
Yeah.
which kind of alleviates some of the pain where the sciatic nerve,
Yes.
really feels so strong right in there. And so I found another surgeon, and I showed him the MRI, and he was like, "You've been walking around with this for 2.5 years. Like, I need to get you on the operating table this week."
Yeah.
This was on a Thursday. He said, "I'm going to get you in for an MRI on Sunday. We don't usually do them on Sundays, but that way I can operate on you on Wednesday."
Wow.
So MRI on Sunday to see how much worse it's gotten, and then on Monday, I'll call you and we'll schedule the surgery for Wednesday. And I was kind of like, okay, I'll just cancel everything for the next 6 weeks, I guess. But I remember that this was in March because he promised me I'd be ready for Tony season.
Oh,
that I'd be
wow.
back on my feet.
Yeah.
Because that was going to be my first year working on the Tony's production team, which is like the honor of my lifetime.
Yeah.
So we did the MRI on Sunday, and he called me on Monday, and I was so excited because it was finally going to be a new reset. And he said, this is good news. And I was like, that's a weird tone of voice. And he said, it's not common, but it happens. Your body has reabsorbed the piece of broken disc. So I can't in good conscience cut you open because there's nothing for me to take out.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I'm still in all this pain. And so we started talking about the way that musculature can like cringe, and it can cringe out of habit. Like if somebody was poking you in the arm hard enough times, then even when you saw them move towards you, you'd flinch. And it was the spasming, it was that flinch out of habit that was causing me the pain.
Wow.
And so I fell into a deep, deep despair.
Yeah.
I wanted to get cut open. I was ready for,
Immediate relief. You wanted that relief.
I just
again.
wanted something that
Absolutely.
said, we're starting over, brand new.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to, I didn't know how to grasp the idea that I wasn't going to be just made better. And I thought, and so I like got in bed because at that point the pain was getting worse and worse and worse. I barely left my bed for like 3 weeks. And the more alone I was,
the more you slip.
the sadder I was,
Yep.
and the more depressed that I felt. And it was like, well, I'm not going to be able to exercise, which means that I'm going to my fitness is going to go by the wayside, and maybe nobody will ever love me because I'm not going to be like I'm going to be alone forever, and I can't even do my work because my work involves being on camera, and if I can't sit in a Broadway show seat, I'm going to, I basically was like, my life is over and there's no reason for living. And the pain got worse and worse and worse. And then around week 3, I had this epiphany, and I went, oh, the sadder I am, the more I hurt. Maybe there is an emotional element to this. And I started reading about the mind-body connection. Everybody accepts that there's such a thing as a stress headache, but nobody thinks you can have stress sciatica. But our bodies are crazy, and our brains and the nerve systems, there are millions of miles of, I don't know if that's exact, but there are at least thousands of miles of nerves in our bodies. And
didn't they say
person,
if you line them all up, it can wrap around the world twice?
Yeah, it's something like that. It feels hyperbolic, but it is a ridiculous number. Yeah. And I thought, there's no way that modern medicine knows everything there is to know. But what I do know is that pain is something that happens both in your brain. Yeah. So the one end of the nerve is attached to my sciatic or my back, and the other end is connected to my brain. Yep. And we've just determined that there's no action that can be taken in my back to fix the pain. Yeah. But what if there was something we could fix on the other end of the nerve to make my pain lessen? Absolutely. And so I spent 10 months researching stress reduction exercises and other non-invasive procedures. And now I'm back to I'm swinging kettlebells, and
That's amazing.
Yeah, it took a solid year, and I was doing acupuncture and traditional physical therapy and screaming into a pillow for 90 seconds twice a week, whether I thought I needed it or not.
Absolutely.
And reading these books by Dr. John Sarno, who sort of revolutionized the mind-body connection. Yeah. I don't know which of those things actually worked, but it doesn't matter because I'm almost entirely pain-free now, and I did not have that second surgery.
Well, I think because we name things as human beings, we started naming things way back, that we almost feel like the brain is separate from the body because it has a different name or stuff, but it's all one thing. We're all one thing, and everything is absolutely all connected. And I think the amazing lesson that you learned is the same lesson that I learned, is that you went to this doctor for this doctor to fix you. And the scariest part of that conversation was you realized you needed to fix yourself.
Oh my gosh,
you needed to work on what was going on internally inside of you. I realized that I had, for the past 10 years, I had been putting off things I needed to work through internally because I was too busy on the external. I got to get the next job. And a lot of this time, this past 6 months, I had to sit down and I had to face myself. And I had to face my past and the fact that face the ugly things, the mistakes I've made, the friendships that have fallen out, the deaths that have happened. And you're kind of faced with that when you have to sit down in silence and have nobody else around. And then that's kind of, it's torturous, right? But then at least you know where to start to begin your own healing. And that's where I'm in the middle of right now is yes, doing the job and doing the job to the best of my ability, but not using the job to distract me from my internal being and taking care of that.
I feel like you're a man now. Like you've discovered that the secret of life, that it is about the journey and not the destination.
Yeah, exactly.
We are, although the way I phrased that, you quote unquote, you're a man now, it obviously was tongue in cheek. But even that reinforces the idea that you arrived somewhere instead of that you're on a perpetual journey. And I think the journey just keeps spreading out before us. And while that for me used to be so overwhelming,
oh my God,
now I'm like, I can't wait to see what's around the next turn, even if it's scary. Because there isn't a place this path ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I will say is that for anybody who's going through chronic pain, there is nothing there. I am in no way saying it's all in your head. No. And this was the reason I was so resistant to it, is that people were like, oh, you need to read this book about the mind-body connection. Like, you don't need surgery. You need to read this book. And I was like, no, my pain is real. Thank you very much. And it wasn't just that I identified with my pain. It was that pain, being a person with pain, was my identity. It was as much my identity as Broadway Girl NYC is my identity, and having an identity made me feel like I belonged somewhere.
Yes.
And I consistently chose my identity as a person with pain because it was more comfortable than not having an identity. And so I had to switch to identifying as a person in perpetual pursuit. How's that alliteration for you? A person in perpetual pursuit of making peace with my pain. Yes. Oh my gosh, so many P's. I hope that wasn't like sibilant in the microphone. There's your new warm up.
Yeah, exactly.
Person perpetually making peace with whatever it was. Making peace with pain.
Peace with pain.
And here we go again. I started thinking of pain as my passenger.
Oh,
and I would not let it drive.
Yeah.
No, she was going to ride with me, whether I liked it or not.
Yeah.
But we were not the same.
Yeah.
And there were times that even when a limp didn't help reduce my pain, I would still limp because it would allow the outside world to identify me.
Interesting. You have that much self-awareness.
Well, I do now. And then I was like, what if people didn't need to know that I was feeling this? It doesn't help to limp.
Yeah.
It sometimes helps to get the attention from limping because that creates a dopamine release in the brain where I feel loved.
Interesting.
And then it stops and I have a withdrawal and then the pain gets worse. So I limp more.
Wow.
And so it's another way I think of it is I've obviously done a lot of digging into this.
No, this is great.
And anybody who was hoping for a lot of insider Hamilton information today, who knows? Hopefully they'll learn something.
How much
they
time
didn't
we got
expect.
left?
We've got 28, 27, 26 minutes left.
We just have
but is like okay, so a chair and a human being both have legs.
Yes.
And in both cases, the chair or the human can break a leg. No theatrical pun intended. Yeah. In both cases, the leg's literally broken and needs to be physically fixed. Yes. Nobody is saying, just read a book and the pain will go away, right? With a chair, you glue it. With a human, you surgically repair it. Yeah. But the chair doesn't feel pain because there's no nerves there. So all you can do is glue it back together. Yeah. With a human being, you have to glue it back together or pin it or whatever the orthopedic process is. And then you have to trace up that nerve to the other end of it and give that just as much care.
Yeah, you got to come at it
or else
from
the
both
pain
sides.
will come back.
Absolutely.
It's not all in your head. The pain is ridiculously real. There are just different ways to treat it on both ends of the nerve.
Yeah.
This has been revolutionary for me.
Yeah.
And I feel like I won the freaking lottery. Yeah. It was also so much work, which actually brings us back around to what we started talking about, which was practice. Yeah. And thinking of my pain as a passenger instead of the driver or my identity took a lot of practice, and it continues to take practice. And there were days that I would go and visit. I go to this crazy unicorn gym called Mark Fisher Fitness.
Oh, yes.
And it's a big on community. And there were days that I would go there and just sit and watch classes just because it reminded me I was still a part of something, even if I couldn't physically lift the bells. Yeah. Or I'd go walk on a treadmill at 2 speed because it was like, when you can't run, walk. When you can't walk, like, sit outside or whatever it is. But like, it took practice. It took work. It was hard. I hated it a lot of the time, but I never allowed myself to just stop and think, this is who I'm going to be forever.
Yeah. No, never.
This was also, I'm working on a book, theoretically, and I wanted this to be a chapter in my book. Yeah. I want it to be. But I have a very hard... What?
I feel like that's a whole book.
I know, it could be. But I could never sit down and write it, and I feel like I just had a revelation about that too, which is I am a storyteller, and I have been a broadcaster for 20 years. And this is my medium.
Yeah.
And I'm totally going to hire somebody to transcribe this episode.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have my chapter.
There you go.
You're going in the special thanks, Nik, Christopher.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I'll take that. And I want a signed copy.
That is a deal.
But you mentioned something interesting about like identity and I think that's so interesting because I think you also mentioned, the Mueller report, like, but we are so attached to our identities that it becomes our reality. And when somebody has a different identity that might contradict yours, it shakes your reality.
Totally.
And
it feels threatening.
Yes, and then you get defensive and it's so interesting that I never thought about it like that. Speaking of identity, they're finding because I think this has been in the back of my mind. There's I've been watching a lot of things on the cosmos and ancient civilizations. They're finding that there might have been advanced civilizations back 12,600 years ago. Isn't that crazy?
How advanced?
Advanced enough to there are these things called megaliths, and so what's that place in England? Stonehenge.
Yeah,
is a megalith.
Oh yeah,
right. They're finding more advanced
like the
architectural
pyramids.
Structures, the pyramids that date even further back than that, and are more advanced.
And we still don't know how those pyramids were built or how those stones in Stonehenge were lifted.
Yeah,
people don't know.
No, they don't know, and they're starting to think now that it actually dates back before we think they did.
Do you think they had
so
robots?
They think, well, maybe that's part of it.
Yeah.
Because the thing, something happened on Earth. Either it was a solar flare or there was a comet that hit that wiped that whole civilization out. I'm like a nerd about this stuff right now. And if you think about it, if God forbid something happened, a solar flare or a comet hit us, everything is so digital that almost everything would be wiped out.
I know.
It's crazy.
There would be all of these weird square-shaped flat glass things
that people wouldn't even know what they were.
Yeah.
They probably would just cast them to the side.
They'd be like, what could these have been used for?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, can you imagine if radio towers didn't exist or if radio waves ceased to work? Like what all of the radios in the world, people would be like, what?
Exactly.
I've actually heard this idea. I wish I could remember who to quote, but that if aliens came, if humans were wiped out and aliens or a future civilization came into our homes, they would think that our religion was television, and they wouldn't necessarily know what the television was. But our homes, it's like a shrine.
Yeah.
Our homes are. All the chairs are faced towards this one thing, and that's where the idol would normally go in most cultures. And that.
Well, what's funny is that it's there's some quote, and I'm going to completely butcher it, but with the absence of a spiritual God, we create demigods, right? So that's all about celebrity. That's all, it goes right into the TV.
And literally everything. American Idol.
Yeah.
It's I am not religious. I am. Another chapter of my book is going to be called. Suspension of disbelief, spirituality for atheists, because I am both an atheist and I have spirituality, and I learned how to do it by being a theater audience member.
I think a better way of saying a spiritual God in that sense is a sense of purpose and a greater purpose that's greater than yourself. Yeah,
and I certainly have that. But what was I going to say? I was going to say that, one of the things in the Bible is thou shalt have no false idols. And there are, I don't know that I'm quoting that right, because again, I am not a religion person. But you use thou
and shalt,
I know,
so
I
it
did.
Sounds right.
So it sounds right. But I know there's a thing about no false idols, and literally we have television shows that are like, hey, we got some idols over here for you.
Yeah, for real.
It's
crazy.
And actually, so in the way that you are into the cosmos and all of these megaliths and stuff, I'm really into almost the flip side of that, which is the way the brain works. Yeah. I do a lot of reading about neurology and evolutionary biology and how different parts of our brain, I think about that made me happy because it made a dopamine release, a burst of dopamine happen. And I think about that kind of stuff a lot. And speaking of identity, our brains evolved to categorize. It started as, is this a safe thing to eat, or is this not a safe thing to eat? And then it became like, would this person be a good mate for me to, continue my genetic line, or would this person not be? And then it became, would this, sofa from IKEA look good in my living room or not? But. And that's why, human beings have literally evolved. We have been made. That made me think about religion.
Yeah,
been made. Have we been made? We have evolved to be comfortable with categorization because it literally kept us alive to survive. So our genetic material would survive to a new generation.
Exactly.
Which is why I think so many people are uncomfortable with the idea of anything non-binary, whether it's gender, whether it's the idea of being bisexual. People want to know, like, are you X or are you Y?
Yeah.
Are you A or are you B? Be whichever one you want, but just don't be in between because that makes our brains feel scrambled in our deep, like, lizard brains.
Yeah. So that means we are actually evolving.
Hopefully.
And some theories are that our sole purpose is to create technology. That everything from the first amoeba or single cell organism has evolved over time so that eventually we will create, we're almost like this virus that's been injected.
Of course, that's exactly what we are. And when I was depressed in bed,
we're constantly
with my pain,
making things better, and we constantly want something better, which is why an iPhone can come out every year and you still get it. We're constantly trying to better ourselves, but also make things easier. And eventually, Elon Musk thinks artificial intelligence is going to take over.
The singularity.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I would like to see a computer write something like Hamilton, which is why I feel like humanity has come to the point of Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Maybe he's a robot.
I feel like he is a robot. And the thing is when
Lin-Manuel Mirobot.
Yes, Mirobot. That's ridiculous. I was a part of the early stages of Hamilton back in 2013, where you mentioned that I played Aaron Burr and I played George Washington. But I also played Lafayette, and I also played Hercules Mulligan and Madison and the King during my time.
You're going to be the first person to ever do a one-man Hamilton.
I know. Actually, Lynn said that, which is kind of funny. And I don't necessarily know if I want to learn any more parts of this musical because I know so many in my head and so many different versions.
Literally be Aunt Peggy.
Exactly. That's hilarious. Where was I going to go? I forget what I was going to say.
I don't know, but I have something that's related to this. And then if you remember, we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people involved in Hamilton, and I'm lucky enough to have seen it at the Public, where I actually was Lynn's guest.
Oh, excuse me.
I know. It was like back when I could get a hold of him, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm not mad about it.
No.
And I think that there has been, in fact, Rory O'Malley, who played the King on Broadway for a long time and then on tour,
we were there together.
He started this podcast called Living the Dream that had about 100 episodes or so. And it was all about how people think your life is perfect when you're in Hamilton. And they think, like, you go to drama school and then you can meet Beyonce because of the way that social media looks. And having an identity as, oh, he's in Hamilton was both the most aspirational identity. But then when you got it, for a lot of people, it was really, really difficult because people around them, whether it was fans at the stage door or even sometimes their own families, would be like, well, your life is great now. And in Rory's case, he and his husband were trying to adopt a baby and, going through, they since have adopted a perfect little baby boy. But like he was going through a lot of struggles, and he's talked openly about
and the
this.
ups and downs,
and he wanted to give people an opportunity to talk about the parts of the business that go beyond this aspirational identity, and to give people who have that view of the stars to understand a little bit more about the nuances of just being a human being.
Absolutely. I mean, but going back to what we kind of started this with is practice. The past however many months of being kind of out of commission, auditioning is a thing, and it's a muscle you must train.
Yeah, it's
So-
kind of like the reason that professional baseball players take batting practice all the time.
Exactly. So if you take into account the year that I was on tour and take into account the couple months before that where I couldn't audition because I knew I was going out on tour, up until basically now, I haven't done that many theater auditions. And I won't say any names, but it was literally yesterday. I had an audition that was a pretty big audition with somebody who was very famous who wrote the music, was in the room. It was complicated music, and I had studied it for, a week, and I was like, I got this. I was off book walking in there, and all of a sudden I walked into the audition room and I saw this very famous person, and it completely threw me. Like, to the point where I had never been thrown in an audition like that, because I had been auditioning for so long, and I just underestimated the energy that is in the room of, hey, pick me, pick me, pick me. Mm-hmm. And then you get in there, and there's this person that you've idolized for years that has nothing to do with musical theater, and they're sitting there. And then you have somebody else that and it's like, oh, wait, this is the guy right here. He's great. He's amazing. This is the VIP that I was telling you guys about. Then there's that added pressure.
How did it go?
It was horrible.
Really?
It was the worst audition of my life. So they're like, okay, let's start with the song. And I was like, all right, great. I got this. And I was like, I can't wait to wow this famous person with how well I do their music, and I'm going to do it better than them because I'm going to add acting. I'm going to add some melodic choices. I'm going to add maybe mix up the rhythm a little bit.
Do you know how badly I want this to be about the Britney Spears musical?
That'd be ridiculous. No, it's not. It's something very, it's going to be really special when it happens. But I get in there, and I can't remember the words.
You didn't even bring your book?
Oh, yeah, I brought it.
Oh, okay.
It was there, but then,
It's been brought.
But the lyrics, like, everything was just a mess, and you see the kind of like, I can't wait from behind the table all of a sudden melt off of their faces. And so then this very famous person was like, hey, let's stop. And I was like, yeah, I can do better than that. And he's like, great, let's try to get it in. I'll help you with the beginning of it. So we'll start the song together, and then, you'll carry on. And I was like, okay, great. Messed it up again. And eventually, he sat back in his chair, and he was like, okay, so there's a scene or something you have to do, right? And I was like, oh, I just missed this chance. Now, I'm a big believer of what's for me won't pass me. Mm-hmm. But it was a huge lesson to learn of, like, I got to start practicing again. I got to audition for a lot of things. I got to do what I need to do to make sure that I'm not thrown by something like that again. And so, I mean, I had the reputation of booking everything. Anything I went in for, I would book it.
You know what that tells me?
What?
You're not aiming high enough.
I'm not. Oh, wow. But I mean, that was great. That was back in the day. But now that you can become really good at something, and once you're out of practice, you can become quote unquote bad at it. Mm-hmm. But that's not to deter you from doing it again. You got to keep going. You got to lean into it. I
want to clarify that what I just said, if you're booking everything, that tells me you're not aiming high enough, is that I did not mean that as a diss. I really didn't.
No, I didn't take it that way.
What I meant is that one of the most profound lessons that I have learned in the past 3 or 4 years, as I have been actively working to become the best version of myself and pushing the boundaries of what I ever believed was possible for myself, I learned that failure is the only way to tell where your ceiling is. And once you know where your ceiling is, you can concentrate on raising it higher and going beyond what you thought you could do. And there are a lot of people who like being the smartest person in the room because that is a great identity to have. Yeah. But then they're never challenged. Yeah. And if you're not failing, and this is a general philosophy I have, that if you're not failing often, you're not like striving far enough, because you should be going for things that are outside of your comfort level. This is why I will debate anybody about Julie Taymor and and Spider-Man is because people are like, well, I guess, she did Lion King and it was brilliant, but now she's lost it because she did Spider-Man and it was a flop. And I'm like, no, that's what we want from our geniuses. We want our geniuses on the back of a success to try something completely different. Yeah. Geniuses must fail, because if they don't take the risks that cause massive failures, then they'll never take the risks that lead to brand new, brilliant art.
Absolutely.
So go make your failure. I like to have parties to celebrate failures, because that means you just went for it. And what we want to celebrate is that you freaking went for it.
Absolutely.
I don't care whether you got it or not.
Yeah.
You went in there and you tried. You pushed yourself. That's how muscles are built.
Yeah.
Nik Christopher from Hamilton. This has turned out to be quite the surprising and enlightening conversation.
I know. I feel bad a little bit that we didn't talk enough about
Hamilton?
I feel like it got we weren't talking about fun stuff. We were talking about good, good self-work stuff. And there is a fun side to both of us, obviously, but I think this is worth it.
I will tell you, there is a very specific reason that when I had the opportunity to create this show with DNR Studios, that I did not call it the Broadway Girl Show. Every consultant and every media expert said, you have a solid brand. It is super easy to identify it. When people will search Broadway, they'll see BroadwayGirlNYC, they'll know who that is, and they will subscribe. Yep. And that's how you get a lot of listeners, and that's how you get sponsors. So it's a no-brainer. I don't care if you actually talk about Broadway, but just call it that. Yeah. And I was like, nope, because I'm not a one-dimensional human being.
Exactly.
And that is a great brand, but it is not my identity. And if somebody wants to hire me for, 6 figures to host a Broadway Girl show, I am there for it.
Hell yeah.
But this is a labor of love. I have to pay for the space, and I partnered with DNR, who are wonderful, but this is actually a paid subscription podcast.
Yes.
To listen to it live or to listen within the first week, people have to pay $6.95 a month, and that seems,
which is actually very affordable and very for the quality of work that you're doing. I think that's really.
And I'm doing 2 interviews a week that are an hour long, plus you get all the other DNR content. And I'm not trying to make this into a commercial, but it was also really important to me that it become free for people a week later, because not everybody has $6.95 a month. And I'm hoping that by me saying, here's my gift to you, that people who can't afford it will say, well, then here's my gift to you. Yeah. And even if they are listening a week later, that they'll still throw a few bucks down as a gesture of support.
And how do we do that? Is there a website or something?
Yeah, thank you. dnrstudios.com/Laura is how you do that. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the reasons that it was so important to me to put my real name, my first and last name on it, is because I want the opportunity to tell stories that are not already covered by other Broadway journalists. I had one of my personal trainers in the other day, and I've had a lot of Broadway people, because that's what I spend most of my time doing. But a lot of times we don't.
But you've left room to talk about other things, which is really important.
Yeah, and my life can change in any number of ways.
Exactly.
But as far as I can project into the future, I will always be Laura Heywood. Yeah. I don't, even if I get married someday.
Yeah.
I'm going to be Laura Heywood forever.
It's still,
I could get a job working for the Yankees and spend every day where you just made. I know you're a Boston fan.
That hurt me a little bit.
Listen,
you said get a job working for the Yankees.
I know you made a face
right.
like you just smelled a diaper. Okay, so listen, I'll change
Go
it.
Red Sox.
I just tried to think of something local.
Yeah.
I worked for the San Francisco Giants for 2 years.
Wow.
2.5 years.
I knew that.
And if social media had existed then, I would have been called Bay Area baseball girl. I never would have moved to New York, and I would have made a career out of it.
Yeah.
Social media just happened to be what I was obsessed. I mean, Broadway just happened to be what I was obsessed with the moment social media hit. Yeah. And social media's growth and my love for Broadway have fed each other in the most symbiotic of ways. But if I had an opportunity, I could get hired by a quilting magazine to go from zero to expert in a year, learn how to quilt. And I'd become obsessed with quilting because that's my personality. Yeah. And I might change this show to have a bunch of quilting experts on. I don't know. My real brand, the Laura Heywood brand.
I don't know if I would listen to a quilting thing, but I might try it.
You might.
Yeah.
Or
and
I
if
might
it's
have,
with you, then definitely.
Well, you might not. I might find a different audience.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
listen, don't worry. I'm not doing any quilting segments anytime soon. What I am going to say is that the real true Laura Heywood brand is just about enthusiasm.
Yes.
And I love getting excited about stuff. And the most visible stuff I'm excited about is Broadway. Because of how I named my random on a whim social media account in 2009. But I'm just as obsessed with neurology and evolutionary biology and pain as a passenger instead of a driver. And
well, that's your
pictures
identity.
of your puppy.
Your identity is not necessarily your
brand.
Instagram handle.
Yeah.
It's you're a complex human being, and you have this thirst for learning about life, and that's what is amazing about you. That's what is great to feel that energy when you come in and talk to you. When I come in and talk to you, and that's obviously what your listeners very much enjoy about you. So I applaud the fact you didn't limit yourself to just speaking on one thing, and that you're allowing your audience and your guests to understand the different parts of you and the different shades and colors and beauty that, come out of you. And through a lot of times we learn more about ourselves through these bumps in the road on the journey of life, if we want to call it that. And I just want to thank you so much for allowing me to come and talk about this for the first time. I don't talk about my surgery.
Well, I really appreciate it. And I am hoping that people who came here to hear about what it's like to be in Hamilton will maybe at first be like, what is this?
Yeah.
And then they'll listen, and then they'll be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that this was exactly what I needed to hear. Yeah. And that catching them off guard might actually, lift them up and make them realize this was exactly the podcast they needed. Yeah. We are unfortunately at the end of our time together.
Fast.
It zips by fast. Let's not make it another 2 years before the next time we sit down, whether it's in front of mics or not. Yeah. And listen, anytime you need anything, you call me. I'm here for you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm proud of you. Yeah. Everyone go see Hamilton, starring Nik Christopher.